All right, let's get at it. We'll call the planning committee meeting to order for February 28th. A motion on the minutes. Move seconded. All those in favor, contrary carried. The next committee meeting will be 4 o'clock on the 23rd. I have a add to item number, we're going to call it 4A. I got Carol Day on for 4A. And we will have a manager's report, and we will also have an in-camera meeting. I believe that we will have an in-camera meeting after that. Some of the items are going to be such that we may require it, and we have one delegate as well. So with that, we can go to the first item, which is the Foursquare Gospel Church of Canada. Anything to add to the report from staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to add aside from highlighting that the subject site is zoned industrial business park, which allows for a range of industrial and commercial uses. The proposed religious assembly use is not permitted in these zones. However, the temporary use permit is proposed to allow the continued operation at the subject site on an interim basis while the religious group looks for a new location with the appropriate zoning. Overall, the parking demand for the religious assembly use would be limited due to the fact that the days of Bible study gathering would also be limited, and therefore planning and transportation have no objection to the proposed temporary use. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, from committee, any questions? All right, seeing none, can I have a motion to approve? Moved, seconded. All those in favor, contrary carried. Thank you very much. It's approved, and they will continue on their, as they were before. Okay, the next item is the enhanced protection for significant trees. We do have a delegate, but I do want staff to speak first before we hear the delegation. Okay, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Jaggs.
Yes, Councillor. Yes, Mr. Chair. Just a brief introduction for our report. The measures before you are proposals to address the contributions to the neighborhood and the community that large significant trees provide. Staff seek to address these contributions with a suite of new regulations within the tree protection bylaw that seeks to preserve in situ large, healthy trees and the contributions they make.
Okay.
With that, we'll be happy to answer questions.
Okay, quick, those questions of staff before we get into it, and I'd like to go to the delegation. Councillor Liu? Alexa?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I have a question to staff. So if I understand correctly, it's proposing a 2-to-1 ratio. If you replace it in your own, that's with a building permit or it's not with a building permit? So if I just take down a tree in my yard, do I have to replace it 2-to-1 if it's a significant tree?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor Liu, I think if it's a significant tree, the intention is that the replacement is 3-to-1, and the one of those three will be a significant specimen tree that would be replaced in situ.
Okay, so just like thinking to certain places that we've seen come up over the years. So if we think about this site that was at Williams and I think Gilbert, there was 2 lots there, and the developer, sure it was a developer, but had it been the homeowner before them, there was 40 trees on their lot, over 2 lots, and they were well overgrown. So if you lived in one of these properties, or your elderly parents lived in one of these properties that's well overgrown, like, is there a maximum number of significant trees that could be considered to be in a lot? Like if you have a 4,000 square foot lot and you have 3 significant trees across your back, you're not seriously thinking we're going to stick 9 big trees in their yard if they, if they're built to the edges. So like how do we sort of make this a bit more practical and put a cap on it so that, this little homeowner, and especially if the city then comes along, because it seems to me we also have a point saying if the city deems them dangerous. So, like if there's rot in the tree, it's time for the tree to come down, but now we also like you to replace it, but there's no room, and now we want $20,000 a tree. Like it seems like we might be in a situation where we're creating some real onerous situations for some homeowners, especially homeowners that have been there for a long time and haven't stayed on top of it. Through maybe no fault of their own, right? Like your little old man or woman, and you're obviously not wielding a chainsaw on Saturday afternoons.
Answer that, and then we will move on.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes, I mean, the whole intent of the tree protection bylaw is to protect healthy trees. So if there is a need to remove trees, it's a simple application. Our tree protection staff will evaluate the situation. Healthy trees are protected by the bylaw, but those with cracks and cracks and structurally unstable would not be. So, in fairness to what we're proposing, any proposal to remove trees as per the bylaw shall be heard by city staff, and we will be happy to go out to have a look and to make the appropriate situation as per the space that is allowed and for according to the best arboricultural practices.
Okay. Does it? So if I have a diseased tree in my yard, do I have to replace it, or it just has to be taken down?
If it through the chair, if it can be assessed that yes, the tree is dangerous or a hazard, staff will confirm. It'll be confirmed through an application process, and depending on the room in the yard, the number of trees and their location will be determined at that point.
Okay. Do we have some sort of guideline for that so that people could maybe understand that somewhere, or that just happens when our city person comes on their land and makes decisions?
No, we intend to accompany this proposal, should it be adopted by council, with a series of bulletins outlining the process.
Okay, thank you. So there will be more clarity surrounding this. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to hear from the delegation first before we go into staff and the specifics of the bylaw. So on table is Sharon McGugan, who has a presentation. We do have her written notes, and now we have another page that just arrived. So Ms. McGugan, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and for it, I'm not sure you can cover it all, so maybe you could do the highlights for sure. I don't want to give you ample time, but 5 minutes is what the bylaw allows, and I'm going to give you that to start with. So where is Sharon on here? Can we open up her mic? Oh. Who's got the mic? Sorry, Sharon, you're on now. I hope you heard me. You have 5 minutes. We have your 4 pages, and hopefully you can give us at least the highlights, because it looks like it's lengthy and you won't get through it in 5 minutes.
Before the clock starts ticking,
I'm not going to Go ahead.
No one checked my audio. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear and see you loud and clear.
All right. No, I don't need to go over these notes. I gave you speaker notes, and I apologize for the late addition. I've been doing a lot of thinking about dead and dying trees and habitat. So we are really happy with these proposed amendments overall. We especially like the language that supports habitat retention and restoration, and really highlights the importance of wildlife and birds. Richmond has a special place on the map worldwide because of our birds and where we're situated. So it's really important that all these steps that we take to protect habitat and restore habitat is really important for our birds. I'm jumping, but the protection of significant trees is really important. Habitat. We're really happy with many efforts that have been taken to protect significant trees, but we also have, we do lose a lot of trees. So I'm commenting on bylaw 8057, Article 2, compel a property owner to remove a hazardous or standing dead and dying tree. This is my dilemma because we understand the importance of safety, and we're not recommending, we're not suggesting that a hazardous tree for safety reasons, we know it needs to come down. But we also would like to see some acknowledgement or some kind of wording in this bylaw that would acknowledge the importance of wildlife trees in the wording, and that efforts could be made at least to keep some portion of dead and dying trees as habitat whenever it is possible. We are losing habitat. Bird species are going extinct. This is not anyone's imagination. This is happening. Dead and dying trees are important nesting sites for cavity nesters such as woodpeckers, owls, and smaller birds like nuthatches. This is really important because if we don't have places for them to live, they die. They go extinct. So hazardous trees need to be managed, but automatic removal shouldn't be the first option. If an assessment of level of risk, nesting values, and pruning, for example, could maintain a wildlife tree for as long as safely possible, we hope that this would be allowed and this could happen. Below, I'm not going to read it, but I've inserted some just possible wording and also a link to the Wildlife Tree Dangerous Tree Assessors course workbook, which I expect that city staff know all about. But anyways, it was new for me. Article 4 says damage, this is replacement of 3 trees for a significant tree, and one would be higher, 8 meters high. We love it. This is really great thinking because we're trying to, what staff I know is trying to do is replace canopy. Canopy is really important, and anything that can be done, and however it is done, because, there may be a little bit of moving around to figure out how to do it, as Councillor Liu mentioned, but still it's worth doing it, and we need to do this. Article 5, security amounts. We'd like to see it higher in cases where trees were willfully killed or taken down. We're not talking about the average homeowner. Article 6, that's how long fees are held for significant trees. I'm sorry, but I made a mistake. I was actually thinking about, we have a lot of problems with tree loss on street trees and other trees. I wasn't thinking of significant trees. So I'm not sure, as far as I know, only one significant tree in my neighborhood I have seen that has failed. Next is bylaw 10039, section 1, subsection 14.2.5. I don't know how you all get through this all the time, but it says to reinforce the image of a well-established landscape, and we suggest deleting the image of, because it's not an image. We want a well-established landscape. We want to celebrate them. This is what we need. And anyways, that's our opinion. Section 2, incorporate mature trees and landscaping. We suggest that the word landscaping be replaced with the word biodiversity or something that represents biodiversity, because landscaping, at least in the past, I know it's been changing, but it often means a lot of grass. So if we can get away from grass, that would be good. Section 2G says, this is fabulous, and thank you so much, tree protection staff who wrote this. Preserve natural heritage by retaining, relocating, and augmenting existing healthy on-site trees and shrubs. thank you, because we're losing so much valuable canopy habitat every time mature shrubs are cut down. Birds need lower growth. It's typically cut. They leave the tree, but everything around it goes. So thank you. That's brilliant. The section also says, whenever possible, plant new landscaping, which will be beneficial to native and migratory birds. This is wonderful, and thank you so much. Whatever actions we take to mitigate ecological loss is a positive step and a shining legacy for our city. Thank you to everyone who has had and will have a part in the excellent and thoughtful recommendations in the report this committee is considering. And do I have 30 seconds left?
Well, you're actually over, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds for being so supportive of the bylaw.
Oh yeah, no, I love people protecting trees are my kind of people. You know, I just want to say this is something that this hasn't been mentioned. I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere, but another way that significant trees are dying is because of English ivy. So in my neighborhood, I'm watching a huge chestnut. It must be 60 feet high. It's really, you know, it's mature. It's at its full capacity for giving back to the air, to the birds, to the soil. And the English ivy has crawled all the way up into the upper canopy, and I watch it die every time I walk by, and it breaks my heart. I checked with the city, the urban forestry, but unfortunately, it's not on city land. It's a few inches off of city lands on private property. But this tree is going to die because the English ivy suffocates it. So I just wonder, I mean, in my hope of hopes, that this is also something that could be looked into or somehow addressed, or, you know, in my wildest dreams, some friendly person from the city would knock on the homeowner's door and talk to him, because really it's going to cost a fortune to cut down that tree when it dies. So anyways,
would you pass that address on to staff so that we have it? We could have somebody go and look at it.
Yeah, thank you so much for it.
Yeah, because otherwise you're talking about it, but I didn't get an address, whatever. So if we can make sure we get that so we can look into it. Yeah. Anyhow, you've run out of time, but there might be questions, and I do want to say thank you very much for actually your positive comments and support in many of the areas. The bylaws and some of the semantics are similar and what have you, and I think the intent is there. So thank you and the committee you represent for being very supportive of the direction the council hopefully will continue to take on this. So I do see one hand, so questions will be prepared. Sharon. Michael, question to the delegate?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Sharon, our delegation, just a couple of questions, a clarification. So in the second memo or email that you sent us today, I wasn't able to click on the link because it was the way the file was saved. Could you remind us, just so I can check with staff if they do have that? You said it was the wildlife workbook?
It's called the Wildlife Tree / Dangerous Tree Assessor's Course Workbook. It's a provincial guide.
Great, thank you. The second question I have through the chair is in your second email, again, I'm quoting you said there was, the definition of hazardous would be the risk to public safety. Was that taken from that workbook?
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
no,
okay.
That was just very fast putting some words together. No.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then my final question to the delegate. This was I think this was in your first piece of communication. You mentioned about biodiversity, the term biodiversity replacing the word landscaping. Could you just briefly touch on the reason for that? Is it from the workbook? Is it? Do you have an example? I know you were at the future site of Polygon Talisman. Do you have an example of how you see those two terms being used?
Yes, I do. And for anyone you can see the example between the difference between our natural parks. As an example, is Pollock Park, Terranova, Garden City Community Park. Those parks have lots of birds, but they also have biodiversity. It's not just trees. It's trees and lower growth and plants and water, all kinds of elements that make biodiversity. So one thing that's lacking in our other parks, because it's more of a 50s model where it's, artfully placed trees, big, beautiful big trees in our park, but there's no lower growth at all. So you don't see as many birds because birds really need, especially the smaller birds, they really need those bushes. And anyways, that's what biodiversity is. It's everything that's around the tree, and it can be the mosses, it can be the fungi, and we know that fungi have an underground network that runs for miles. So it's not just a mushroom you're looking at, it's actually like an underground communication system. So all of these things work together to provide habitat. If you just have a tree and some grass, that's not really habitat. You've got the key element, the keystone element, the most important, the big one, but you don't have all of the other things that make an ecosystem.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, Carol?
Thank you very much to the chair, to the delegation. Hello, Ms. McGowan. Thank you so much for coming out today. Okay, so I heard everything you said, and I made some notes. Tell me if I got this right. These are the changes that you'd like to see. That we incorporate mature trees and biodiversity into development area, replacing the word landscape. That's good?
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is add that wildlife trees can be maintained when not hazardous.
Yes.
Perfect. And extend the maintenance period to 2 years for new trees.
Well, yes, that would be wonderful if we could do that, for sure.
Okay, and then when I'll be making a motion to make those changes, they get staff input on that. And then after this is over, I would like to do a referral to staff that we reach out to homeowners about ivy. I myself almost killed my cherry tree because of ivy, and when I realized what was happening, I tore it all off. So at any rate, those are the motion I'll be making later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the delegation? Okay, thanks very much, Sharon. Comments appreciated and duly noted. Thank you. Okay, I'll open it up. I'd just like to say to staff, I think Harold and I were the only two around when we did the tree protection bylaw back in 2006. And I thought in this report you did an absolutely outstanding job of staff. So I want to say to staff, you get kicked all the time. But this is one time I'm going to throw some accolades your way and say thank you very much for the report. Harold and I were there when we fought to get the first tree bylaw in. And I think it was, to be quite frank with you, I think it was a 5-4 vote. Harold can correct me if I'm not, but we did get it in. And we've made tremendous amendments since then. And when I look at what you've done and supportive, I really think you've covered it, and this will probably be one of the best once we get it all in the bylaws, and I'm assuming it's going to go through. It probably is one of the best in the province of British Columbia. So kudos to you. I just have a little comment, if I may, from the chair, because I didn't see any hands immediately. It is in the ratio on item number 4 on page 35. Significant tree damage, one required replacement tree, a ratio of 3 to 1, and a minimum of 8 meters high. Maybe it's something we look forward down the road. Is that enough as a deterrent is what I'm looking at, more so. And I'll just make my comments and you can take some of them under advisement. To me, that is sort of not as much of a deterrent as I would like to see. Maybe it's in combination with fines. I have to agree with the delegation with regard to, and it's something we can refer to staff to see what the implications are. A 1 year looking after a tree and then we've got to go look at it and inspect to make sure that's trees there. Maybe we should extend the time it should be there so it can take hold, but also in the bylaw state that the tree will be inspected. We will send people out to see that that tree is still there, and we retain the deposits if you wish. And the other thing, the $20,000 tree deposit, again, this is personal, it's an opinion. I don't think it's enough. You know, on some properties to get rid of a 60-foot tree that's 18 inches across or 35 inches across, if I knock the tree down, $20,000 is nothing to improve the value of my property. My property just went up $500,000 to $1 million by knocking that tree down. So again, these are personal things, but we are in the right direction. It's not a criticism, it's an observation, and it's a personal opinion. And like I said, I think the bylaw, you've written it up well, and I've read it, and you have to read the bylaw and you don't just look at it, because it's all laid out there in each of the steps. So to staff, from my perspective, a vote of thanks for what you've put forward. Kudos. I'm going to go to Mr. Ersic first, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the issue of the $20,000, I just want to point out that where there's willful destruction of a significant tree, the $20,000 is the security, but the thrust of these amendments, that's to ensure the survival of the replacement trees. But the thrust of this report, we're responding to a request from Planning Committee to make sure that when there's willful damage to significant trees, that the perpetrators don't reap a benefit. So if people are damaging significant trees to get a bigger building envelope, for instance, with these amendments, there would be no advantage to them. They would have to replace at a 3-to-1 ratio, one of those trees would be an 8-metre tree, a significant tree as a replacement, and there would be no benefit in terms of the buildable area for someone that perpetrates that sort of damage to trees. So that's really the thrust of this. And we would not relinquish our right to prosecute an individual for a willful damage either. But for the first time, we're making sure that if someone removes a tree without approval, inappropriately, that they are really held to account for that, and they don't increase the buildability of their lot by reducing the significant trees and the tree canopy, etc. That's really what we're trying to do here.
And the other thing too, see, worship and you know, when we approve these things, we approve them in good faith, and we want to see the building go on, etc. And I'm just wondering, is there any thought of ever looking to slowing up the building permit or holding it up because they've done that kind of willful damage to us?
Through the chair, perhaps I'll tackle that one, James. You know, our law department would probably tell us that we can't do that directly, but what I would say to you is that where we've had willful damage, that complicates development on the site, and almost inevitably there is a slowdown in terms of the issuance of permits, because for starters, we have to determine what's transpired and what will be done. So where there is willful damage, usually that will result in a significant slowdown in permitting.
Okay, thank you, good job. Okay, Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a few questions to staff, and if I don't see other people with questions to staff, maybe I'll just give a comment at the same time, and then I won't speak later. as just a council member, but not a committee member. So my first one is related to the delegation, pointing out some of the definitions, which I think is the largest issue I'm having with this report, is on page 41, where it lists the different definitions of the words used in the policy. There is a definition for hazardous and standing dead as a combined definition, but there's no definition for dying. And so I have that hesitation, having followed this since the chair mentioned 2006. So it's really got my attention in politics in my early 20s, this item. And so I've been following along and seeing the loopholes and exemptions and some of them closing. But I see this definition issue with this policy update as opening some up again. So could staff comment on the not including the definition of dying and lumping hazardous with standing dead?
Through the chair, I'd like to refer that to Mr. Jaggs, who's our expert arboriculturalist. Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the definition is for hazardous or standing dead tree. The intent of having that definition in the bylaw is to allow staff to precipitate the removal of a hazardous tree, and to also ensure that we can locate a replacement tree in that same location. Speaking to the issues that Mr. Ersick had raised earlier, ensuring that there is no benefit to a developer if they've removed a tree, that we can get a tree back in that location. As well, it is intended to address life safety issues. Staff, I just want to our delegate, want to note that staff do support wildlife trees, and that is something we discuss with homeowners all the time, that it's a benefit to them. So when that can be done, we certainly encourage it. I don't think the bylaw is intended to regulate that, but it's part of going to be our overall education information strategy and information bulletins that get developed if this bylaw amendment does get passed. It's really difficult to define dying, and that's why it's not in the bylaw. Everybody has an idea of what that means. To get philosophical, after something is born, it begins to die. So there's trees in maturity that some people would say are dying, but in fact they're just in a late maturity, and they're not hazardous, and they don't need to come down, and it's something that we wouldn't issue a permit for. So it's kind of there is a gray area with living things when we're trying to regulate them on private property. But the intent, again, for this definition is to really precipitate the planting of a significant replacement tree in the same location.
Great, thank you. Through the chair, that's a fantastic answer, and I think the delegate helped to stimulate that. And our existing knowledge as a department here working on this. But because of that lack of inclusion of the definition on our planning page 34, I really feel that the Article 2 at the bottom should have the dying tree component striked out of it. I don't think it should be upon the city to tell a property owner to remove a dying tree if it is simply a stump that has nowhere to tip over. So I just think, due to the definitions included here, the dying tree really shouldn't be mentioned. The second part in the report here on page 47, this is getting into the bylaw amendments. On page 47, it has Article F in the middle of the page, and I think again, Article F should be addressing hazardous trees, but not standing dead trees, not those that are not risking public or a house or building that could get hit. If it's a simple dead tree, I know the staff wouldn't go out of their way to point those out, but still, having it in the policy, others will read into it and not have the same mindset as our staff just demonstrated there, and they will use this as an excuse to get what they deem a dying tree or a standing dead tree to be removed, so they can level that spot off and put gravel or whatever over top of it. So we need that language to be addressed, which, if it's not amended today, maybe needs to be referred back at the next meeting. The next one I have is on page 53. This is the last part of the bylaw concern. Again, on page 53, this is like Article 5.3, hazardous or standing dead. I think that whole area, that whole portion should just be about hazardous trees, and have the standing dead lines 3 or 4 times, five times, have that part removed from that amendment component. Before I finish here, could staff comment on that reason for including it, or reason for standing firm with having the standing dead as part of those?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'll comment on that. We have an example that I think everyone's aware of a standing dead sequoia tree that the city is in the process of addressing and getting replaced. And to have that tree removed, that tree could stand in its current location. It may not be hazardous right now, but this is really just the regulatory authority to be able to require a dead tree to be removed, again, for to precipitate a replacement tree. It's not something that we have to do. It just gives us the authority to do it, which we don't have now in the bylaw, if we ever need that authority to step in. So it's by no means intended to precipitate would city staff go around asking standing dead stumps to be removed. That's not our intent, because we, again, see the great value in that, and it's something that we do encourage homeowners, but it's just a regulatory authority that we don't have in the bylaw that's very important to address specific situations of willful damage to get replacement trees in the ground in the same location.
Thank you. Through the chair, I appreciate, I was going to bring that up, so I don't have to bring up that line of discussion. I pass that tree on Williams Road most days of the week, and I see some of my students walking underneath it. And the sidewalk, you can't even see the concrete. It's full of all the dead branches and stuff that's fallen off that tree. And this is exactly why I'm mentioning in that part of the bylaw, it doesn't need to have standing dead. That is a hazardous tree as it stands right now. So I think approving this as it's written, removing the standing dead, still would allow.
Let's make our comments, Michael, to staff, and they can take them under advisement. Let's not get into debate. Okay. Next. That it? Thank you. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Well, I've been listening with interest to the conversation on definitions, and just wondering, in many instances, the city has an arborist, or in the case of an application, the homeowner or developer hires an arborist, and there has to be concurrence, about those kinds of things. Is there common language in the arborist community that we use so that there are not issues then, as have been discussed?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, I think Gordon would be the best to answer that.
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, yes, there is common language that we use. And the word hazard, it has to be defined through a hazard assessment worksheet to determine hazards. So a tree in poor condition may not be hazardous. A living tree with a lot of cavities may be hazardous. So there's an assessment that needs to take place before we make that determination.
So the language that we're using then in the bylaw would be language then that arborists would understand.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Carol?
Thank you very much, to the chair. So I had asked earlier to the speaker to confirm the 3 amendments that I suggested. I'm not sure if you got them as I rattled them off. I just wanted to ask staff if those are workable within like a kind of on-the-fly amendment to the policy. Shall I repeat them, or did you guys make note of it?
Yes. Through Through the chair to Councillor Day, yes, we have made note of that. We will review, but I do like to offer that in terms of the period of assessment for the tree, 1 versus 2 years, the salient point is that staff will be monitoring the situation, and it's 1 year if everything goes well and the tree looks like it's going to survive. If after a year it looks like, you got to do X, Y, Z, then it goes on indefinitely until staff is convinced that the tree will survive.
That would be redundant, that part of it. Okay. All right. So
I'm wondering, staff, a number of comments are made, and I'm just wondering, before I go to Harold, whether we can endorse this tonight, and then if there are any comments or whatever, you could give them to us before Monday. You'd have time during the week to look at the few comments that were made. I think would give you adequate time. You could do that, Mr. Erceg?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, we can. I would encourage you to move ahead.
Yeah.
Not because there isn't merit in what is being suggested. It's just crafting the perfect bylaw is an ongoing process, and the changes that we're proposing here are significant. And personally, I would like to get them in place if there's support for them, and we could take any direction or referral and either provide you with feedback for Monday, or even if there's a formal referral on something in the medium term. And so my preference would be to move ahead, and then if we need to make some more amendments to the bylaw based on what we hear, to make those amendments down the road.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. Thank you, Harold. You're the last speaker before we go to a motion.
Yeah, I've got a question. Can you hear me okay? My computer's sound is working.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay, good. I have to wear earphones for some reason or other. The sound went. Anyway, I've got a question regarding my own situation here. I assume we're okay because we're a farm, but we have 4 holly trees that were planted in 1917 when this house was built, and they're all dying of holly disease. 2 of them have about 2 years left. One of them actually survived. I think it's got about maybe 20% of its foliage, but we're trying to keep at least one of them alive. But we've already planted 20 replacement trees. We've planted a sugar maple that's now already about 20 feet tall, and we've planted about 20 apples and cherry trees in various heights up to the maximum they grow is about 14 feet. So what happens if you've already planted everything in advance in anticipation of a tree being cut down?
Yeah. Through the chair to Councillor Steves. That's a fantastic question. I can't answer that.
Anyway, that's my problem. We've already planted the replacement trees.
We'll take them.
Through the chair to Councillor Steves. You are correct that you are exempt on agricultural land from obtaining a permit and the associated requirement for providing replacement trees. If your situation was on a single-family lot in an RS zone, then staff would obviously go out and have a look at the trees that have been planted and take those all into consideration in the determination of the need to plant additional trees.
Okay, that's good. I doubt if anybody else would ever do what I do, plant in advance, but just in case they do.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, we've had everybody go around once. I'm going to move the recommendation as it stands on the floor, and staff can take comments under advisement. I don't know if there's a seconder. I've got 2 seconders. Okay, the documentation as you have on ELN 2 and 3 is on the floor. Carol?
Yeah, so I just want to make those 2, not 3 now, just the 2 amendments. And I have to agree that landscape is probably not the best word, and I'm wondering if we could just direct staff to.
Would it be better just to refer those? I'm trying to pass this and then make it as a referral, 1, 2, 3, whatever you've got, to see where they can implement them. I think it'll be a lot easier. Yeah. As Mr. Erceg said, we can make changes rather than change now. Let's make changes once we got something to change.
and not hold it up. Okay, I get it. Thank you. Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm coming back to you. Okay? It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion on the documentation on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, it's carried. Carol, to you, referral to staff to consider
that
A, B, and C.
Consider A, removing the word landscape and incorporate mature trees and biodiversity into development area. So pretty much what Ms. McGowan has on her page, so her right, section 2.
Yep.
And then that's number one. Number 2 is to add wildlife trees to be maintained when not had.
Did we?
And then,
go ahead. I'm just making sure we got contact with you. Carol, you're cutting out. Let's go back to, we got number 1. Let's go with number 2.
Number 2 is add to it that wildlife trees be maintained when not hazardous.
Okay, thank you. We got that. Thank you. I'm working with the clerk here as well. And number 3?
Okay. Well, number 3, I said we don't need to worry about the 2 years of maintenance because staff are already doing that. But I think that Mr. Gowen's suggestion about English ivy is excellent. I don't think that's going to be part of the tree bylaw, though. I'm not sure if staff could recommend whether
just
that's
ask staff to investigate the propriety of having English ivy planted around trees.
Yeah, I learned the hard way, and I think that most homeowners would appreciate it if someone knocked on the door or dropped a note off and said, just so you know, that ivy you planted is going to kill your tree.
Okay. All right, that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, Michael, on the specifics? Michael?
Yes. Yeah, thank you through the chair to Councillor Day's referral points there. Just to clarify, I think the first one is biodiversity and wildlife trees, not just mature trees. But maybe I'm wrong on that. And then the third potential item there, not clear if direction is given, but the English ivy situation. There's been examples where council in the last 2 years has given industrial sites a larger footprint if they protect the trees that they're going to keep on the property. And even in those requirements, they were to remove English ivy. It's been 2 years later. I drive by it every day. They still got English ivy growing 2 years more up these trees, choking them out. So we need that to be part of any new referral. So I think that language should be in this referral. Thanks.
Well, we're going to have staff look at English ivy. Okay. On the referral, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't vote on the referral, but with regards to ivy, quite often our staff do communiques to the public on many different things, on landscaping, on trees, and I think they could probably do a communication tool around ivy and the pros and cons of ivy and what you should know about ivy. I think that'd be very easy for them to come up with and put out through our communication tools. And when we resume our in-person events, when they have the tree sale, all those kinds of things, I think there's a great opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Okay, excellent suggestion. Okay, it's on the floor. All those in favor of the referral? Opposed, if any? It's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, good job. And again to staff, good work. Okay, BC Housing Safer Program. Anything to add? I'm not sure who. Cody, Cody Spencer, let's plug him in, wherever he is on.
Yes.
Okay, you're on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have nothing to add to the report, but are happy to answer questions.
A good program, good comment. Councillor McPhail?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Well, excellent report, and I agree with your recommendation. I just have a question about number 3. What does number 3 mean? Are you saying, because I think what you're really trying to say is that the City of Richmond send in a resolution to the UBCM, and I don't think that really says that. Is that what you're trying to say?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, staff will defer to council on the specific wording for that recommendation. And yes, the general intent is to provide information or
or whatever is appropriate to UBCM on this issue.
Yeah, so there is still the opportunity to send a resolution to LMLGA. The deadline for that is March the 4th, and local governments are encouraged to send resolutions through to their area associations so that it can be vetted there before going to UBCM. So I have some suggested wording that you may want to do. It's just that the City of Richmond submit a resolution to the LMLGA requesting UBCM requests the provincial government and BC Housing for an increase to the maximum rent ceiling and monthly safer amounts provided by the BC Housing Shelter Aid for Elderly Renters Safer Program. And I can send that all to you if you like. And so the last time a resolution was discussed at UBCM was in 2013. So I think it's time to that, it's time for another one. But I mean, we still have time, I think, to send it to LMLGA with, if it was to go to council next week, and then staff could just put all this together in a resolution form. Thank you.
Can I suggest to committee that this number 3, because it is only one, that we include Councillor McPhail's resolution as number 3 for council on Monday, and it's fully covered, the UBCM and the LMGA, and we have it just as a substitute. Do I have consensus? Consensus? We have consensus. That will be the resolution. Councillor McPhail, thank you. If you'd make sure the clerk gets it, okay, on it if we haven't got it. Okay, so the 3 will be a replacement resolution. Carol, on the resolutions on the floor?
Yeah. 1, 2, and 3, right?
Yeah,
okay,
and the new 3.
Yeah, fantastic report. This was real eye-opening to me. I had no idea the disparity was as much. Like the average one bedroom unit rents for $1,313, and they're at $803. I think this is way beyond an emergency situation, and I think we need to express that in our letter to the province, because this is critical for many, many, many people. And I think we should just really enforce that in that communication.
Can I ask staff, part of this discrepancy, and I would agree with those comments, basically what we have on the table is not acceptable. Seniors, have already committed to our community, and now they're over the years getting hurt. How much of this comes back to suggestions of BC Housing and their scale of rentals, et cetera? We always refer to BC Housing and what they do, but sometimes, depending on where it is, they're not necessarily in line. They're high end, to be quite frank with you. They're not lower end. So how much of this safer material do you think came from BC Housing as well? That's an opinion, by the way.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the SAFER program is delivered by BC Housing, and all aspects are designed by BC Housing. So it's exclusively within the mandate of BC Housing to make amendments. In terms of the general supply of affordable housing for seniors, the city is committed to playing a leadership role to increase affordable housing, but doing this really requires the involvement of the provincial and federal governments, particularly in terms of funding.
Okay, all I'm going to say, within their scriptures, there appears to be, on occasion to the reader, some very big discrepancies, and that's all I'm going to say. Okay, great report. Seeing no further speakers, all those in favor? Contrary carried. Thank you very much. And the next item is the response to the Steveston Waterfront. And I do have some referrals after that, but let staff go with it. Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have nothing further to add, but I would like to ask Mr. Kevin Eng to provide a brief summary of this report.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of committee. I don't have any additional information to add, but would like to provide a brief summary that touches on key components of the report and proposed amendments to the Steveston Area Plan. The report and proposed amendments to the Steveston Area Plan provides direction on the preferred location of the waterfront walkway, including provisions for pedestrian access from Bayview Street with the ultimate objective of providing a continuous waterfront walkway over the long term in this area. Broader implementation policies are proposed that apply to the waterfront areas as a whole, along with a number of focused policies specific to the potential future redevelopment of two privately owned properties in this area at 3866 and 3880 Bayview Street. For these two privately owned sites, there are numerous factors that impact the timing of redevelopment for either of these properties. However, current development on 3866 Bayview Street indicates the timing on this may be further into the future, whereas the site at 3880 Bayview Street is currently vacant with development potential based on the provisions of the plan. Also included in the amendments to the Steveston Area Plan is a policy that does not support dead-end walkways. Future comprehensive development of waterfront lots will need to comply with this policy and also take into account the surrounding context and walkway infrastructure that exists at the time of a redevelopment proposal. Future redevelopment of the waterfront lots along Bayview will be required to comply with the current Steveston Area Plan provisions for density and height, as well as proposed waterfront access and walkway policies contained in the report before committee today. I'm happy to answer any questions of committee.
Okay, well, I have a couple of comments and questions. I'll support the walkway plan for today, personally, but I have tremendous concern about further development of residential along the Steveston Walkway. Harold and I fought heavily with to make sure that the city has and people have access to the water. And this is one of the areas where it does have access to the water. And I'm surprised to see 3880 already zoned two-story. And I'm going to have a referral to refer this portion of it back, because it's been there since 1986, to remove the residential plan on the waterfront of Bayview. For those of us, I guess Harold and I again, were around when Bob Bealey tried to put a two-story inn on the waterfront. The people of Steveston actually, and committee of Steveston, revolted, and it got turned down way back a number of years ago. And to see that this is still in there, I can't support that, and I will not support it. Actually, I believe the public should be going to the water down there and have an opportunity. So that's what I'm going to put on after. But in the meantime, I hope committee would support the walkway component of it, and then I would make a specific referral on residential, commercial on the waterfront by blocking of access to it. So when that time comes, I'll speak. Okay, I saw Harold, and then Carol, and then Andy.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. We discussed this at the Harbour Authority meeting last week quite briefly, but I know they're concerned about expansion out into the harbour. And I have a question about the map on page 80. Now, I gather this is a map that's all been approved, but in terms of 3868, how did we get that square out in the front? And what was that supposed to mean? Because the big concern is that that would continue on in front of 3880 because of the precedent. My recollection of the Blue Canoe was that the present patio that's at the south end of the building was supposed to be the walkway.
That's correct.
So does anybody know how all this happened?
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, maybe I'll begin this response, and I might pass it over to Kevin. To begin with, on page PLN 80, that is the existing Steveston Area Plan map. That walkway does represent potentially a walkway going around the building, the chart house or catch building or Blue Canoe building, whatever you want to call it. Certainly that was the idea, to either go through the building or around it. The proposed or refined map would be on PLN 82, which removes that kind of walk around, and the vision would be to have a waterfront walkway that would go all the way along the shoreline. But obviously that would be predicated on that building being obviously significantly modified or removed. And perhaps I can ask Kevin Ng about perhaps the historical context to the approvals to that building in the 90s.
Through the chair, in response to Councillor Steve, the current development at 3866 Davie Street, when it was developed at the time, did not include any provisions for public access on the site or towards the end of the site as it projected out into the water. So there are currently no public rights of way secured on that property for that purpose. Further, I would add that when we consulted with Steveston Harbour Authority about the current provisions in the area plan referenced on PLN page 80, they did have concerns about that component of the plan whereby it would potentially introduce further structures and improvements into the harbor area, which would pose issues with their operations and safe navigation of boats. So they were concerned with that component of the plan that potentially allowed for that walkway to project out in there. The plan before you removes that consistent with Steveston Harbour Authority and DFO comments that we consulted with them on.
Okay, see that, unfortunately that's a little different than my recollection, and I guess we never tied it down, because my recollection is that patio that's out at the end was supposed to be the walkway. We may have never tied it down and zoned it that way.
Yep.
But that's my recollection. And that if another building was built, it wouldn't go any further out. But where you've got the walkway coming in, that's what would happen. If a building went further out, it might be one the same distance out as 3866. But the walkway would be, in other words, the walkway would go out and come back in. And so my thoughts are that, yes, I agree with the plan on page 82 that it should go right through, but in the short term, that patio should be walkway. I don't see why the walkway couldn't continue until that, I mean, it'll be another 20 or 30 or 40 years before that building's demolished. The second question I've got is on page 81, it shows the potential walkway with a jog in it as from 3880 to 3900. Where did that jog come from? Obviously, the property is weird there, but what plan is that from?
The corner building.
Yeah.
Through the chair, in response to Councillor Steve's question, the property line configuration between 3880 and 3900 is unique. You can see the triangular jog or projection of 3900 goes out into that little area there. Once again, the alignment of the walkway is generally for diagrammatic purposes, but we did receive feedback from DFO and Steveston Harbour Authority that would be the likely alignment to achieve a functional connection of a walkway should one be established between those two sites, and that would be the means to achieve that continuous walkway in that area.
So basically, you would not do what's on page 82 then. Page 82 has it going straight across.
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, page 82 is definitely schematic. I think what Kevin Ng is referring to is that the walkway, would probably follow the shoreline. However, schematically, we'd like to have a walkway that would run all the way along the waterfront in Steveston. So those details would have to be worked out when there is a development plan.
Okay, and the other thing, while it's not dealing with the walkway, I certainly object to any residential. I have no idea how we got that on there. I do recall that we had some differences of opinion when the Blue Canoe building was built, that some members of staff felt we needed to have buildings that commemorated canneries, and I know I objected to it at the time, and I sure don't like the proposal that's going in. Besides that Blue Canoe building, we would have another massive building, especially if people are living in it. Yep. I don't know how we deal with that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, again, I think that this referral was mostly around trying to enhance the walkway network, the plan for the walkway network, and we think we're doing that. The reality is 3866, it was in place when I started with the city in the late 90s. So I can't really speak to what was intended, but we're accepting the reality that the building on that site is going to be there for a while before it's either taken down or modified in a way where the walkway can punch through. And so the biggest change on page 82 is that for 3880, we're relocating the access to the waterfront walkway from Bayview Street to the west side of 3880 to avoid dead-end sections of walkway where you have to double back. The use issue, the residential use on the waterfront lots on Bayview, that wasn't part of our referral. But we did do the research as part of this because committee raised some concerns about residential. So it's been allowed since 1986, I think, Kevin, the residential use. We've just flagged that for committee. And, you know, if you're uncomfortable with that and or the height that's allowed in the existing plan, then I think you should give us some sort of a referral or a direction to take a look at that. But it isn't directly connected to the walkway referral, but we did the research on it because committee had raised some concerns about the residential component.
Yeah, okay. I'd certainly like to make that referral because at the time I remember way back in '86, the Blue Canoe building got there because it was supposed to look like a cannery building, which I disagreed with at the time. Right. But to add a big block building there with apartments was not the intent at all. It was to make it look like a cannery building, and you're not going to get that.
Okay. Harold, I'm going to come back to you because I have a referral written down for that very thing, so we can work it after we hear the other two speakers. Okay?
Yeah, good.
All right,
Yep.
Carol?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I want to go to the walkway, but I want to touch on what Councillor Steve said. I remember when I was first a councillor, staff brought forward a plan to allow for redevelopment of the south side of Bayview. And I think it took me 4 kicks of the can, but we finally went, and if you look at PLN 71 in the third paragraph, it says in 2017, council approved a revision to the south side of Bayview to establish a maximum density of 1.2 AR. Still etched in stone, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, yes, there was amendments made in 2017 that actually reduced the height and density along that portion of Bayview.
At that time, that reflect was already there, whereas zoning actually allowed for much higher density, and so that was a bit of confusion between the public saying, oh yeah, we want to keep it the way it is, but they didn't know that the way it is actually allowed for much higher density. So we fixed that. We dodged that bullet back in 2017. But getting back to the walkway, I was also at the Steveston Harbour Authority committee meeting, and loud and clear heard that the Blue Canoe jut out restricts access to that north dock. So anything that would come, even expand it 2 inches, would be a problem for them. So I'm really pleased that staff heard them loud and clear. And I'm wondering if at some point we can't find a way to make that walkway go straight through, because I don't think we should increase the dock out at all. The primary focus is the fishing dock and having access to the boats. So we don't want to do anything that's going to infringe on that. And I'm very happy with the map on the proposed map for the walkway on page PLN 82. So as long as there's no, I mean, it sounds to me like you're working hand in hand with the Steveston Harbour Authority. And if that's the case, then I'm good with this the way it is. And I look forward to the referral motion. Thank you.
Okay. Andy?
Thanks, and through the chair. Thanks for the report, because there's a lot of urban myth out in the community about who controls what and what's able to be done along the harbor. And it may be straightforward to staff who deal with it all the time, but it's not out in the public. So I think it's really good to have a look at the jurisdictional complexities that are involved when you're talking about the harbor and the waterfront. There's a lot of competing interests, totally legitimate competing interests, and federal, provincial, harbor authority, fisheries all overlap or live side by side. So very good report in that respect. I think the goal for the public, and I think it would be very advantageous to the degree we can achieve it, would be to have continuous access and walkability along the waterfront. You know, the report outlines the difficulties in that, and it's certainly not going to happen overnight. So I just appreciate the report. The one question I did want to just clarify is, when you talk about the proposed width of new boardwalks, what is the width of the boardwalk that exists now, you know, in front of Shady Island and Salmon City, that boardwalk? What's the width of that compared to what's proposed down the road?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, I'll pass that over to Mr. Ang.
Through the chair, in response to Councillor Hobbs' question, the width does vary from approximately, on average, about 4 to 4.5 meters wide. There are areas, and that would basically be from the edge of the patio seating areas to the edge of the railway along the dock. There are areas that are certainly wider, where there are little seating areas, or areas where there are larger areas of gathering, where specifically where you can get access down to the fishing sales dock area. It becomes much wider there, but that's approximate in terms of the width of the current walkway that's there.
Sure.
That runs along the waterfront.
Yeah, and that makes total sense, and you know, I think everybody's pretty familiar with it. But I guess just the last comment, notwithstanding the Steveston Harbor Authority needs and fisheries and the fact that it's a working harbor, I would be interested to know, since the building is going to be there for quite some time, like a few decades, it would be interesting if there's any solution that can be achieved to having a boardwalk go around, notwithstanding previous comments, somehow go around I think it's 3866, the Blue Canoe end of the building. Yeah, so I'm sure you'll be following up on that with our various partners, and I realize that there might be a complication because it is a working harbor, but that might be one solution in the shorter term to make it a more fully connected boardwalk. Thanks.
Okay, Michael, wrap it up.
Great, thank you. I just have some directly pointed questions so they can probably be answered timely. The first question, discussion around the Blue Canoe building and the existing paths. Can the existing infrastructure be widened? And tied to that, can the current east side of the building have an additional platform added to the way it is now, or does it need whole new pilings and such?
Through the chair, in response to Councillor Wolf, the existing building at 3866, so the Blue Canoe building, generally extends to the limits of its current footprint area. So any additional infrastructure would require expansion of that footprint.
Okay, thank you. The second question to the chair is flipping between the two pages, 80 and 82. So the existing map to the proposed map, there's two differences I spot. It's like looking for what's different between pictures. The first one is there's the blue circle around the deck that would go around the Blue Canoe building, and then the proposed one doesn't have that. And then, as was pointed out by staff, number 5, that required connection, is moved from the existing to the proposed location. Could we not have a third option proposed today, where we keep the long-term vision so it can go through the new building or modified building, or go around it, plus have the required connection in the more strategic location as being on the west side of the Imperial Oil site?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, that could be possible. The revised map is really just trying to show that a waterfront connection should connect right across the waterfront. So if there's a way to negotiate to have access to go around the existing building in the short term, being the next 20 years while the building is still there, certainly we would do that. And I think, once again, this map is meant to be somewhat schematic, showing that we would want a connection between the properties.
Thank you. My final question then, through the chair, is maybe staff already know this answer, to be looked into, and it doesn't need to be a memo or anything, but the new Westminster Pier, what's the deal with that? Is that, whose jurisdictional property is that? Could that not fall in line, like we're talking about here, as being a waterfront access? And so does staff know the answer to that and the similarities between the two sites?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I can't speak to the new Westminster Pier at the moment. we'd have to look into that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a resolution on the floor. I suggest we endorse that and get the walkway looked after, and then I have a motion. Moved, seconded. Any further discussion on the walkway? All those in favor? Contrary, carried. Okay. I'd like to move referral to staff to revisit the program from 1986 and 2017 on the south side of Bayview to remove residential and commercial from all plans on that waterfront. I'm not sure if we can wordsmith it to make sure that I've got it, and Harold, hopefully that covers what you wanted as well. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, it's moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yep.
We do have 2 current active rezoning applications involving residential use on the south side of Bayview Street.
Yep.
Should we be looking at passing a referral as mentioned, I would suggest that motion include holding active rezoning applications in abeyance until such time as the referral is addressed.
And so included. Well said. Thank you very much. Included in that, and the clerk has that. Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Harold?
Yeah, I have a further comment. Could you at the same time provide us with a map of the building next door, the Blue Canoe building, and the walkway around the end of it, so we can see if there's any ways that we can connect the 2 sites together? Quite honestly, I'd be happy to expropriate the wharf out in front of the building if we had to, because and my recollection is it was supposed to be for a future walkway. Terry Crow was deeply involved in planning this way back when, and the whole idea was that the walkway would go in front of any large long buildings, and if we didn't put that in the agreement, it was certainly intended.
Yeah, Harold is correct, and I would support that 100%. Okay, seeing nothing on the, no other talk on the referral, Carol? On the referral? Go ahead.
Yeah. Can the referral include getting some more intel on what in that Blue Canoe site? Because I also remember that there was like an open wharf, and it just seems like the restaurant has just kind of slowly taken over. So if we could go into the archives and find out what in the world went on and make sure that it was legal, because I'm wondering if it is.
Through the chair.
We'll be going into camera on that particular issue.
Okay.
I think that's where we'll deal with it. Yep. Okay, any further discussion of Mr. Ersick, did you want to help us clarify it?
No, nothing to add, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay. All those in favor? Contrary, carried. Okay, it's carried. Very, very good. Okay, Carol, do you still want to go ahead with this motion? We have Mr. Ersick and also our lawyer here with regard to, I don't know if you want to hear from them first.
Yes, please.
Okay. Tony, are you still with us?
Do you know what we're talking about?
Yes.
You know
that here.
For Carol circulated a resolution on February the 8th with regard to the city doing some, and I guess my question is this out of order, or can we have some direction on it from your perspective?
to the chair, should I read it in case there's people here that didn't hear it? It sounds like Councillor Hobbs wants me to read it.
I didn't read
He doesn't want you to read it.
Oh.
Yeah,
I do.
Everybody has a copy of it. Councillor McPhail.
I don't have a copy, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought this went to every council member. Okay, go ahead, Carol, read it. Read it, and then I'll go to Tony. Go ahead, you're on the floor.
Thank you. Just for clarification, I put this forward, and then yourself and the clerk suggested that this be postponed to the next planning committee meeting, and then it would have been written and on the agenda. So then now it's here today. So I'm happy to read it, and if there's any confusion, we can always delay it to the next council meeting.
No, please read
it.
So
shall I do it?
Yeah, you can read it. All right.
Thank you. The referral to staff to research whether the City of Richmond can require that developers marketing their units for sale in all new developments must give local buyers an exclusive opportunity to purchase new homes before sales are open to the rest of the world. This would include pre-sales and resales on of the units.
Carry on. Rationale?
The rationale was that the sales of condos and townhouses often occur before the homes are built, and this increases the final price due to investors flipping the property. Local buyers are often paying far more than the original price because they do not get the opportunity to get in early, and this makes new homes even more unaffordable. Pre-sales and resales should be offered to locals exclusively for a specified period of time because they're more likely to occupy the.
Okay. All right, that's the resolution, and I'll go to Tony, our lawyer, to see whether this is something we can even deal with. Okay?
Well, through the chair. Sorry.
Yep, go ahead. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps before Tony weighs in, I think that this is an area that is worth researching from my perspective. I think that the motion that you have before you, it's suggesting a remedy, exclusive marketing to locals, which I don't know around the table whether everyone supports kind of going to that step here today. But I do think, based on my perspective and my experience with development in Richmond over many years, this is an area worthy of research. The reality is that we don't know very much about how residential units that are created within the city with council's approval are actually marketed and consumed. And we do know that there is a substantial amount of pre-sale and also resale before units are bought by their final occupier. But, we are aware of that. But I would say, and I don't know whether Tony's going to have an issue with this from a legal perspective, but from a research perspective, from a planning perspective, I think that this is an area worth examining. And in fact, as we're, putting the final touches to the report for the OCP review, which will be coming to you next month, actually later this month at the next meeting, this is flagged as an area for retention. Now, as a staff, we're not prescribing a response, or we're not assuming that we know what is happening in this area, but we certainly do think it's worth taking a look at and getting the facts in terms of how newly built units, residential units in the community are being marketed. And in fact, to determine whether some segments of our community are excluded from purchase at any stage of marketing.
Okay. All right, Tony, anything to add on that?
Through the chair, from a legal perspective, there's nothing wrong with the referral. The referral is simply to research, as Mr. Ursag has pointed out. I haven't had an opportunity to consider the substance of the referral. Inevitably, law will be asked to provide its comments on legal issues that are arising from it. But the referral itself is purely to research, and I have no issues with what Mr. Ursag has said.
Okay, well then let's, as Mr. Ursig suggests, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the referral? All right, all those in favor? Contrary? Carried? All right, it's referred to staff for dealing with it. Do we have anything in the manager's report in public?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have 3 reports. I think Wayne, John, and James.
Okay, and then we are going into in camera. Are you okay, Andy?
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to committee, in terms of an update, a memo was circulated to Mayor and Council last week regarding the ALC's decision regarding a non-farm use by the Christian Missionarian Alliance Church and School on Number 3 Road. The ALC has approved that application. That application was forwarded to the ALC with Council's endorsement on July of 2021.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have 3 items that I'd just like to give a quick update to committee on. First one is just an update on the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy. As you know, Metro Vancouver is in the process of updating their regional growth strategy entitled Metro 2050. Last November, Richmond Council endorsed comments on the draft strategy, which was forwarded to Metro staff, and most comments from Richmond were actually incorporated. At the January 28th board meeting, the draft strategy was referred back to Metro staff for 1 more month to explore the potential for stronger climate action and to work with member jurisdictions to resolve any outstanding concerns. So we anticipate further discussion with Metro staff on the draft strategy, and we'll use that opportunity to discuss any comments that weren't incorporated into the strategy. And we'll keep committee and council up to date as this moves through the Metro's bylaw adoption process.
Right.
The second update I just wanted to provide was regarding the Yvr Land Use Plan. A couple of weeks ago, there was some press on Yvr looking at commercial development opportunities on Sea Island. Staff spoke with Yvr staff, and we can confirm that any specific development plans are years away. Engagement with the City of Richmond would be required to work out planning, transportation, and utility issues. Any long-range development plans would be focused in 2 areas. The first one is on the north side between the North Runway and Ferguson Road, which is designated for a mix of warehouse and logistic uses that are related to the aviation industry. Development in this area would require realignment of the Ferguson Road. And the second area is Airport South, which may include a combination of airside uses such as cargo buildings and aircraft maintenance facilities. So these long-range plans are all consistent with the amended Yvr Land Use Plan, which was supported by Richmond Council last year. And we'll update committee and council if there's any specific plans coming forward. And the very last thing I just wanted to mention is that Statistic Canada will be releasing the first themed release for the 2021 census tomorrow. Staff will distribute a memo to council this week following the press release.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, Harold, Harold,
one last one, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I just wanted to, got a question for John. In terms of Metro 2050, basically it was referred back, and myself and Jonathan Cote and a few others are going to be discussing further amendments. And I'm just wondering if you've looked through it, and a number of the things that Richmond suggested weren't adopted in it. And if you perhaps give me some comments on that, what wasn't covered. There's a number of things that we thought should be added to it.
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, absolutely. We'll provide you some comments. I believe the Regional Planning Committee is meeting on Friday this week.
That's right, and we're having a special meeting amongst some of the members just before that meeting.
Okay, we'll provide you some feedback.
Great.
That'd be great.
All right, Mr. Cooper, you have the floor.
Okay, sorry about that.
No,
Mr. Chair, we just to give a very brief summary of a memo that was circulated to council. 2 weeks ago, we are busy as a city in terms of construction. We have last year's figures show $719 million worth of approved construction, which is on par with the year before that, and it's greater than the 10-year average. And commercial industrial construction appears to be strong. We're experiencing a resurgence in the single-family construction cycle, and we seem to be having a higher revenue from our permits due largely because of a higher percentage of really complex and really large mixed-use projects. So, as a way of summary.
Great, thanks very much. Good. Any others? Any other for the good of planning and public? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Move second. All those in favor, contrary carried. We are adjourned. We need 1 minute.